Two peoples, same God, same blood. 4,000 years of hatred. Who is right? Who is wrong? What if the answer is both? What if God purposefully created this conflict? What if this war has no villain? You're watching the news. Iran threatens Israel. Israel responds to Iran. Missiles, nuclear threats, rhetoric of annihilation. And everyone asks why. Why did these two peoples hate each other so much? The answer isn't in the last 70 years. It's not in the founding of Israel in 1948. It's not in Islamic Iran in 1979. The answer lies 4,000 years in the past. In a tent in the desert, with a man named Abraham, 2 women, 2 sons, and an impossible choice that God forced. This isn't the story you learned in church. This is the story told by both sides. And when you hear both versions, you'll understand why this hatred never ended and perhaps never will. Because this isn't just the story of Iran and Israel. It's your story. A story about family, rejection, favoritism, stolen inheritance, and resentment that spans generations. In the next 10 minutes, you will discover biblical truths that many prefer to hide. Prepare yourself. Because what you are about to hear will completely change how you see this conflict, and perhaps how you see your own family. 2,000 years before Christ, in Ur of the Chaldeans, Mesopotamia, there lived a man named Abram, who would later be called Abraham. He was 75 years old, rich, respected, but childless. In the ancient world, not having children was considered a curse. It meant your name would die. Your inheritance would vanish. But then God appeared to Abraham and made an impossible promise. Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. But Abraham had no children. His wife Sarah was barren. Genesis clearly states Sarah was barren. She had no children. So how could God make him a great nation? But Abraham obeyed. He left Ur. He traveled to Canaan. He settled there and waited. 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, Sarah remained barren. And here is something most people ignore. God said, I will make you into a great nation. But he never specified through which son. He never explicitly said through Sarah. The promise was about Abraham's descendants. Any descendants. This ambiguity would change everything. 10 years had passed since Abraham arrived in Canaan. He was now 85 years old. Sarah was 75 and still childless. God's promise seemed impossible. Then Sarah made a decision, a culturally acceptable decision at the time. She had a servant, an Egyptian woman named Hagar. Sarah proposed something to Abraham. Go to my servant. Perhaps I shall have children through her. This was not considered betrayal in their culture. It was legal according to the laws of that time. If a wife was barren, she could give her servant to her husband, and the child would legally belong to the wife. Abraham agreed. Hagar conceived. Finally, Abraham would have a son. But when Hagar realized she was pregnant, something changed. She began to look at Sarah with contempt. Sarah felt humiliated in her own home. Jealousy turned into cruelty. Sarah began mistreating Hagar so harshly that Hagar fled into the desert. Pregnant, alone, without protection. But then something extraordinary happened. An angel of the Lord found her beside a spring in the desert. The angel said, "You will give birth to a son, and you shall call him Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your suffering." Ishmael means God hears. God heard Hagar's pain. God promised that Ishmael's descendants would become too numerous to count. But the angel also gave a prophecy. He will be a wild man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he will live in hostility toward his brothers. Hagar returned and gave birth to Ishmael. Abraham was 86 years old. For 13 years, Ishmael was Abraham's only son, the son he loved, the heir. But then God appeared again, and this time God said something shocking. "Sarah will bear you a son, and you shall call him Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him." Abraham pleaded with God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before you." But God said Isaac would carry the covenant. Yet God also promised to bless Ishmael and make him a great nation. Years later, Isaac was born. Now there were two sons, Ishmael the firstborn, Isaac the son of promise. But Sarah saw Ishmael interacting with Isaac and feared that Ishmael would remain the true heir. So she demanded something cruel. "Cast out this servant and her son." Abraham was heartbroken. But God told him to listen to Sarah. Early the next morning, Abraham sent Hagar and Ishmael into the desert with only bread and water. Eventually the water ran out. Hagar placed Ishmael under a bush and walked away because she could not bear to watch him die. But God heard Ishmael crying. An angel called to Hagar from heaven, "Do not be afraid. God has heard the voice of the boy." Then God opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. Ishmael survived. He grew up in the desert. He became an archer. He had 12 sons who became 12 tribes. Meanwhile, Isaac remained in the promised land. Years later, Abraham died. And something remarkable happened. Isaac and Ishmael reunited to bury their father. For a brief moment, the two brothers stood together. But after the funeral, they separated again. Isaac returned to Canaan. Ishmael returned to the desert. Their descendants grew apart and eventually became enemies. 4,000 years later, their descendants still struggle over inheritance, identity, and blessing, but the Bible presents a solution. A reconciliation that Abraham never saw. According to the New Testament, that reconciliation comes through Jesus Christ. In Christ, the wall between peoples is broken. In Christ, the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael can become one family again. And perhaps the deeper lesson is not about nations. It is about us, families divided by resentment, brothers who stop speaking, generations carrying old wounds. The story of Isaac and Ishmael is also our story, and the question is simple. Will the cycle continue? Or will someone choose forgiveness? Because the conflict that began in a desert tent 4,000 years ago still echoes today. The peace is still possible. And it begins with a choice.